Nearly 1 in 5 American adults will have a diagnosable mental illness in any given year. It is May, which means it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and in this video, I'm going to be covering my absolute favorite topic, which is the intersection of money and mental health. And in my experience, when I was first diagnosed with different mental health disorders, when I was in high school, compared to life now, I am so proud of how far we have come, and at the same time, there's still so much work to do. I tend to align my beliefs around mental health and mental well-being with the World Health Organization, which says that mental health is not just the absence of mental illness, but it's also being able to have overall well-being, being able to experience joy, being able to ride the waves of life, including its ups and its downs, and to be able to live your best life because your mental health is supporting you along the way. I'm going to discuss the intersection of money and mental health, including some statistics that really drive home how impactful the intersection of mental health and money are. I'm also going to talk about some of the emotional experiences that people can have when it comes to mental health and money. And of course, as always, I'm going to leave you with some actionable tips to help support your mental health and finances as an individual, as an ally who is supporting other people who are experiencing mental health issues, and also if you're an employer, what you can do to advocate for your employees on your team so that they can experience financial well-being that includes their mental health care. My name is Lindsay. I'm a certified financial therapist, licensed social worker, and founder of the financial wellness business, Mind, Money, Balance. I help people at the intersection of money and mental health, which is why today's topic is so exciting and so important for me. I also help workplaces, organizations, and conferences understand financial wellness by providing tailored workshops to help you improve your relationship with money. If you're curious what financial wellness topic best suits your team, I have a brand new quiz just for you that you can take. I will link it in the description box. So let's talk high level how money and mental health intersect. We know that when a person is experiencing a mental health stressor or a mental health problem, it is so much harder for them to take meaningful financial action. And when we think about taking meaningful action when we are feeling really good in terms of our mental health, it makes sense that if we are experiencing mental health stressors, it would be so much harder to take action. In fact, 63% of people who experience mental health issues explicitly say, yes, it's harder for me to make financial decisions when I am not doing well mentally. And how this shows up for a lot of people is struggling to do things like pay their bills. 42% of people say it's hard for me to literally do the action of paying my bills when I'm struggling mentally. And outside of the literal action taking to be able to pay bills, people who say that they have a mental illness say that they're just experiencing more financial stress in general. 29% of people who experience mental health problems have about a 1 month capacity to be able to cover their bills and living expenses, which is why I'm a firm believer that we need an emergency fund. I will link to my video that covers more in depth how you can come up with your emergency fund number, but it's especially important if you experience a mental illness that makes it hard for you to go to work, take care of people, or live your life. When it comes to the things that we get from spending, we forget often that we're not just getting the literal thing when we add to cart or when we go into a boutique and pick something out. Remember, I have a video all about brain chemicals when we shop, so I just want to again normalize that spending money literally feels good. We can experience a range of those happy hormones, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins when we shop. It gives our brains that little rush or that little high when we spend. If you are a person who experiences bipolar illness, you know that when you experience mania or hypomania, one of the big symptoms is spending excessively or taking financial risks, such as gambling or coming up with an amazing new business idea that requires draining your retirement account. It can be incredibly dangerous when a person is experiencing mania or hypomania to make wise financial decisions because their mental illness is driving, in many instances, those decisions. When it comes to depressive disorders or anxiety disorders, a lot of people can get into this spiral of struggling with motivation or being fearful of making a mistake, so they freeze and aren't taking meaningful action to do things like automate their finances, pay their bills, enroll in retirement accounts, things like that. Plus just the emotional and mental workload of doing things like comparison shopping when you go grocery shopping or looking up places to live when your lease comes to an end. Again, these are heavy lifts for people who aren't experiencing mental health stressors, but when a person is experiencing depressive, anxious, hypomanic episode, it can become insurmountable. And with this cycle, there's also this shame that gets layered on, this embarrassment, the shame, this frustration of, I can't believe I didn't pay my bills, or I can't believe I didn't find somewhere new to live, or I can't believe I didn't enroll in my retirement account. And now I feel bad, I feel guilty. And that guilt, that badness, that shame gets in the way of taking meaningful action. And when it comes to money, there are triggers all over the place. For some people, opening up their physical envelopes or their physical bills can cause a lot of distress. For other people, checking their bank accounts or checking their emails can cause a lot of stress, or answering the phone, reading text messages, all of these different things that are often required in today's financial age can be really hard to do. And so we need some additional support. Other ways that money can impact our mental health is that if we are stressed out about money, it can lead to a physical set of symptoms, such as anxiety symptoms or depression symptoms. When we experience depression symptoms, it can look like trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, sleeping too much. And when we aren't sleeping well, it creates this negative ripple effect. You know how it is when you don't get good sleep? You can feel a little bit cranky, you can feel a little bit irritable, your brain can just feel foggy and heavy and lethargic. And it can be hard to take those necessary steps to deal with your personal finances. When it comes to mental health and money, the big thing here that we need to make sure that we address is a big source of income for most of us is working. And if our workplaces aren't supportive of our mental well-being, they may punish us when we need to take a day off for our mental health. There might not be the resources or the safety net in place for your manager or your workplace to support you through a difficult mental health period. We don't often have the language to say to our manager, our supervisor, or our team, hey, I'm experiencing some mental health flare-up. I need to take a little bit of time off, or I need to adjust my schedule to better fit my current sleep schedule, or I need to get some additional support on some of these things that I said I would take on. What can often happen is our colleagues, our supervisors, etc., can just see the way that we show up, and they say things like, oh my gosh, there's Lindsay again. She's coming in late. She's leaving early. She's forgetting to attend these meetings. And they just see the symptoms of the way that our mental health manifests. And it can give us a hand slap, which can look like a performance improvement plan, or getting pulled aside and getting a talking to, or having your teammates maybe talk behind your back about how they're frustrated with you. Instead of being able to say explicitly and clearly, hey, I'm struggling, we often end up being punished at work. And again, then that shame and that embarrassment layers on. So if we know we just need to tell a teammate or advocate with our manager for some additional support, but we're struggling, it can be hard to have the language to do that. And then that shame and embarrassment gets in the way. And we start saying things like, oh, all I have to do is email my boss and say, hey, I'm struggling. I need a little bit of extra support this week. Or, hey, I'm struggling. I might need to be taking some of my personal days to tend to my mental health care. We can struggle with how to actually say it. And then we don't say it. And then instead of being able to say it to our boss or human resources who can hopefully provide us with some support, we just don't say anything at all. And if we don't say anything at all and we get on a performance improvement plan, or we get our hand metaphorically slapped, we may end up not being able to get that promotion. Or if we're working in an hourly situation, we may have our hours reduced, or we might just stop being on the schedule, right? When we're struggling with our mental health and we're trying to show up at work, our finances can be directly impacted because somebody else is in charge of our paycheck. And if we can't advocate for ourselves, or if we don't have the support in place, we may end up earning less. Now, some of you might be saying, well, that's why we have things like disability insurance in the United States, that people can file for disability coverage if they experience mental health issues that are impacting their ability to take care of themselves or function at work. Sure. Technically, they can. However, if anybody has ever tried to fill out one of those forms, you know that the jargon in and of itself can be impossible to navigate, not to mention some of the barriers that I mentioned earlier, such as opening up papers, creating online accounts that can get in the way. While the Social Security Disability Administration says it usually takes 3 to 5 months for applications to be processed, according to the Disability Attorneys of Michigan, they say in many cases it takes up to 2 years to get your application actually processed. And even then, process does not mean approved. If you are denied, then you have to file an appeal, which requires more time, energy, and money that a person with a mental illness just might not have. So that's really how the intersection of money and diagnosable mental illnesses intersect. But I also want to talk about how our mental health can be impacted even if we don't meet criteria for a mental illness when it comes to money. According to a 2024 survey on mental health and money, 61% of respondents say that they experience symptoms of anxiety related to financial stress, and 40% experience symptoms similar to depression related to financial stress. This varies between gender and age, with more millennials and Gen Zers endorsing those types of experiences and women experiencing it more than men. In fact, almost 1/3 or 32% of women say that they stress about finances every single day. When it comes to how it shows up, a lot of them were saying that they experience sleep disturbances and decreased energy levels. So even if your financial stress isn't impacting your mental health to the point of a diagnosable or clinical level, you're not alone if financial stress is impacting your mental well-being. So what can we do? There are so many things that we can do to tend to our physical, financial, and mental health that are all intersected. I'm a big fan that when you move the needle in one life domain, that you're going to have positive ripple effects in other life domains. So if you're listening to this and only a few things are really resonating, try them out, because the reality is if you're taking some time to tend to your mental health, there's a very good chance that when you improve your mental health functioning, you will have a positive ripple effect in being able to make financial decisions, or being able to advocate for yourself at work, or being able to move your body or get more sleep, right? When we tend to one area of our life, it's very, very likely that we will get those benefits in other areas of our life as well. So don't feel overwhelmed. These are just suggestions. And I hope more than anything that it doesn't come across as a to-do list, but as a menu of options that you can pick and choose from that help you to feel empowered and be able to take steps to tend to your mental and financial health. I'm going to break this next section down into 3 different segments for individuals, for employers, and for people who are supporting loved ones or colleagues with mental health stress. All right, when it comes to individuals, I want you to check in to see, is my money plan working for me? What are the things that I'm doing currently that feel good in terms of my relationship with money? And what are things that maybe I could use a little bit of extra support on? Some examples of some self-knowledge check-in questions that you can ask yourself. Are there certain times where you're more likely to spend money? Are there certain situations where you're more likely to save money? How does it feel? What are the emotional responses that you get when you swipe your card, or when you add to cart, or when you spend money? Do you feel differently when you're earning money, spending money, saving money, or giving money? How do you feel when it comes to each of those 4 common interactions with money? Which ones are more likely to be stressful, and which ones are more likely to feel supportive? And when it comes to money management, which tasks are ones that are more likely to cause some mental distress? For example, is opening up a bill really challenging for you? Is verbalizing to your friends that you can't afford a specific activity that they suggested stressful? Is it doing things by a certain deadline, such as filing taxes or paying bills? What are the things that you struggle with? And how can you find ways to scaffold or to support yourself through those different things? I will link a podcast episode of Popcorn Finance where Chris Browning had me on to talk about how we can afford therapy services in different ways that we can take advantage of the services that might already be available to us, to give you some tips on making sure that you're tending to your mental health. And other things to do are making sure that you have a routine that supports your mental and financial well-being. I have a video where I talk about my financial routines that you might want to check out if you need some ideas. And I have a video as well on 37 ways to practice financial self-care to give you even more ideas, again, that you can pick and choose from to help support yourself financially and mentally. If you're an employer, I have an entire video on financial wellness in the workplace and why it's so important, but just a quick summary of things that you can do as an employer or as a manager to help support your teams with the intersection of money and mental health include normalizing it, talking about mental health awareness and talking about money. This can be seemingly small gestures, such as putting cards in the restrooms with numbers for counseling services or for debt services. Just making those resources available to your staff can be really helpful. Talking about it when you're onboarding new staff or when you're doing quarterly meetings or performance reviews, making sure that those things are supported. Of course, you don't need to ask, nor should you, for specific diagnoses or mental health stressors that your team is experiencing, just reminding them of the ways in which your team or your workplace supports mental health care. This could be something as simple as, hey, I noticed you didn't take any of your personal days last year. Remember, you can use those for anything, whether that comes to therapy appointments, going to get a physical from your primary care provider, or just taking a day day off to tend to your overall well-being, reminding your staff that they can and should use the services that are available to them. Make sure that managers and HR managers have access to education and information to really understand the intersection of money and mental health and how to be able to scan the horizon for possible intersections of mental health or financial distress in your team, and make sure that your managers and HR managers have the support services in place to be able to support people who seem to be struggling. If you want to get clear on how your workplace is doing, in my video on financial wellness in the workplace, I have 5 questions that you can start asking yourself as a first step assessment to see how well you are supporting your teams when it comes to financial well-being. And if you are a person who is doing pretty okay mentally at this moment in time, and you want to support your colleague, your friends, your loved ones when it comes to the intersection of money and mental health, I've got some ideas for you. You can be an advocate at your workplace to make sure that they are providing holistic mental health and financial benefits across the board, making sure that when they send out those annual or quarterly surveys to ask how the team is doing, making sure if they don't have a financial well-being program in place that you are typing into that survey, what's up with financial wellness? What's up with mental health care? Making sure that you are continuing to say, hey, we need to do better than this. You can do that through surveys. You can do that through talking to your managers or talking to your HR reps, or if you are an HR rep, advocating to make sure you're including financial wellness and mental health benefits in your workplace. A reminder as you're watching this that as a financial therapist who helps people at the intersection of money and mental health, I would love to support your workplace, your conference, or your organization as you support your employees, your staff, your peers, your friends at the intersection of money and mental health. If you want to learn more about the type of work that I do or about hiring me to come into your workplace, organization, or conference, head to mindmoneybalance.com/speaking. I'll be sure to link it in the description box. When it comes to how to support your loved ones outside of work, making sure you're voting at local, state, and federal levels for policies that are supportive for folks who are experiencing mental illness and who are experiencing financial stress. We have to advocate for change at all different levels, and we each have a different calling for what feels best for us, whether it's talking to our manager, whether it's voting, or whether it is volunteering to talk more about policies, laws, and bills that are going to be on the ballot and helping people understand the benefit of passing them or not, depending on how supportive those bills and policies are. If you have a friend or a loved one who knows that when they experience a mental health crisis, their finances tend to struggle, let them know the tangible supports that you can provide for them. Again, you do not have to do all of these things. You do not have to extend yourself to be available for all of these things, but these are tangible things that I have seen to be beneficial in my financial therapy practice that you might be able to do. For example, you might temporarily take a loved one's credit card if they are experiencing a mental health crisis with the promise to give it back to them once their mental health crisis has subsided. Similarly, you could come into their home with permission and delete their saved credit card off of internet browsers or off of favorite stores to create an additional barrier to spend if they are experiencing a mental health crisis. You can delete apps that encourage them to overspend, and we might think of shopping apps as being the big culprits, but also games, especially when a person is experiencing a mental health stressor. Games might be a way for them to kind of dive into something or to practice some stress relief, and a lot of those online games charge money for things like coins or bonuses or power-ups that can be really hard to say no to when a person is experiencing a mental health crisis. Be open to receiving texts of screenshots or links of things that somebody wants to buy. You can say like, hey, I'll be your gatekeeper about whether or not you're able to purchase this specific thing at this moment in time. So just knowing that you might get some of those texts and you have a go-to response. It might be, cool, wait 24 hours, or it might be, are you sure about that, right? You can come up with some shared language that you can support them with that they have agreed on in advance so that when they are sending you that, you are responding in a way that feels trusting and supportive of them. Finally, something that we can all do is offer them some loving support and some loving distraction. If they need a distraction and they need some mental health TLC, take them on a walk, play a game night, have them over for dinner. Shoot, take advantage of public transport and ride a bus all around town and do some sightseeing These things do not have to be big. They do not have to be over the top gestures of support, but they can just be being with them, literally by their side while they're experiencing this stress. When it comes to providing support financially outside of some of those things that I mentioned about taking things away to help create some barriers to make it harder for them to spend, another thing that you could do is show up for them. If they have told you, look, it's literally hard for me to log into my bank accounts or my email or open up my bills, you could say, I can come over and sit next to you or be in the same room or pay my bills at the same time. Sometimes we just need that physical support of having somebody nearby as we are doing those things, and that's something that you can offer up to them. Simultaneously, you could be their advocate if they need some additional support when it comes to paying an overdue hospital bill. Sitting with them on speakerphone while they make that call and saying at the beginning, hey, I am so-and-so's advocate here, and having them give you verbal permission to be their advocate while you're on that phone call can be so supportive. Look, this mental health awareness month, it is not just about saying, let's talk about mental illness. It's also saying, let's normalize that this happens to a lot of people. It's also about saying, how are we as individuals, as allies, and as people who hire other people, what are we doing to help support people at the intersection of money and mental health? I hope that this video has given you some tangible ideas to really see how we can all make meaningful difference, even if it is by taking 1, 2, 3 of these things that I mentioned and taking meaningful action. I am cheering you on as you tend to your mental and financial health, not only in May, but every single month and every single day. See you next time.